Recommend for beginner fishermen that you start with using a closed face reel. That is where the spool is. All you do is you push the button, and as you cast it, the line flies in the water as you let go of the button with your thumb, and then you reel it up. For beginner fishermen, it's always easier to use live bait. Live bait seems to work better. When you see your bobber go down, make sure you set the hook. So essentially what you're doing is you're lifting up on the fishing rod. Setting the hook in the fish's mouth. When you're fishing for small fish that have small mouths, make sure you use a small hook. Maybe a little bit smaller than this one. For beginner fishermen, the easiest fish to catch are bluegill.
The easiest fish to catch are bass.
The easiest fish to catch are bluegill.
The easiest fish to catch are bass.
Would you mind? I'm trying to talk here. For more advanced fishermen, I recommend trying lures. My favorite lure is what is called a spinnerbait. So you cast it out. Cast it out. Reel it in. As you reel it in, the blades turn. The blades create a lot of flash in the water. For extra flash, you need extra blades. Talk about a lot of flash on this one. For advanced fishermen as well, I recommend a bait casting rod. Most people use these once, and they never use them again. The key is to keep your thumb on the spool. So as you push the button down with your thumb, you move your thumb over to the spool, cast it, and as soon as it hits the water, before it hits the water, you put your thumb on the spool, or else you'll get this, which is called bird's nest. So when the fish are active, I fish a spinnerbait. So you can fish this pretty fast, or if the water is very warm. When the fish are not as active, I switch to what is called a plastic worm. If the fish are inactive, say a front went through, bluebird skies, no clouds at all in the sky, a plastic worm is a lure that you want to fish very slowly. I use a Mr. Twister keeper hook, so the barb goes in the top, the hook goes into the side. I also put a slip sinker on the top to add a little weight, so the fish will not feel this as they bite a hold of the worm. So if you feel any tension on the line whatsoever, you set the hook. My favorite colors are purple, blue, and black.
And pumpkin seed.
When it comes to fishing, just keep things simple. The simpler you make it, the more enjoyable fishing will be. For beginner fishermen, I recommend using live bait. A small hook like a number 8 size hook or number 10 work pretty well. And fishing for bluegill are excellent for beginner fishermen. I think they're one of the easier fish to catch, no matter the temperature outside, no matter the time of year. For the most part, they always seem like they're biting. So put a maggot on here or a small worm. If you're a beginner fisherman, the best place to start is with a closed face reel, or what they call a spin cast reel. All you do is you push the button with your thumb, and as you're casting the rod, you let go of the button with your thumb, and the line flies into the water. As soon as the line hits the water, what you do is you take the reel handle and turn it until you hear the click sound, and just reel it once or twice to make sure your line is tight. When you see your bobber, if you're using a bobber, go down, what you want to do is you want to lift up on the top of the rod, and essentially what you're doing is you're setting the hook in the fish's mouth. So you're setting this hook in their mouth. If you don't set the hook, a lot of times what will happen, especially if you're using live bait, is they'll nibble at the worm and you'll have nothing left. And a lot of times if you miss the fish, say if it's a bluegill biting, what you want to do is just keep it right in that spot, or right where they're biting, and just keep on setting the hook until you catch the fish. My favorite lure to fish with is called a spinnerbait. I mostly fish for largemouth bass. This lure is very easy to use. All you have to do is cast it out and reel it in. Basically cast out. I usually skim the top of the water, but also you can retrieve it and then stop the retrieve, and it kind of sinks, and then retrieve it again, almost like a yo-yo effect. It goes up and down in the water. I recommend putting a trailer hook on your spinnerbait. A lot of times the bass will swim up to the lure and they'll just grab the tail of it. Other times they won't bite down as hard. I think the trailer hook really helps with catching more fish. Bass are an ambush predator, so they hang out near structure. So they like to hang out near logs and rocks and docks, weed beds, lily pads. The problem with fishing near structure, which is important when it comes to bass fishing, is the trailer hook a lot of times will get caught in the log. It'll get snagged in the log. My recommendation is to fish it fast around the structure. I also recommend a spinnerbait that has a double blade on it. Kind of gives it more flash, also produces more vibration in the water. The spinnerbait is trying to pretend to be a bait fish, a shad, something that a bass might eat. So the colors I recommend, chartreuse and white, usually works pretty well. It's muddy water, clear water. So a spinnerbait is something that I use when the fish are active, when they're really easier to catch, or maybe if it's really windy, I'll use a spinnerbait. If I throw the spinnerbait for, say, 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours or so, and I don't even get a bite, then I know the fish are less aggressive. I will switch to what is called a plastic worm. So black or purple or blue are probably my favorite colors to use. I will use what is called a Mr. Twister keeper hook. I believe they still sell these online. You take the barb and you push it down right into the top of the worm, and then you take the other end of the hook and you put it into the worm. This is completely weedless. You also want to put a sinker. This is a bullet-shaped sinker in front of the hook. This gives you some weight to be able to cast it. And once you cast it, you do not want to fish this very fast. You want to fish this slow. So the spinnerbait is something you fish fast. The plastic worm is something you fish very slow. So as you cast this out, you leave it there and you crawl it on the bottom very slowly. This is a lure that requires a lot of patience. So as you fish this slowly, you just crawl it on the bottom of the pond or the lake. You barely reel it in. So just crawling it along. So these less active fish, a lot of times you may have to drop it right on their nose in order for them to bite. And this is something that has been really productive, especially on days that the fishing is just not so great. So switch over to a plastic worm. But between the spinnerbait and the plastic worm, these are my go-to lures.